All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to introduce Rick Vuyst, who a lot of the people in the room will know. So we have a number of people from different parts of the country, and so they might not have a clue, but they're going to find out. Rick was on for many, many, many years the local Channel 13, WZZM, which is an ABC channel. So he had a segment, and he, I don't know if he had a title, just the green thumb?
I was an entrepreneur.
So there's a lot of puns that are going to happen today, and I don't know if any of them, actually I think some of them maybe are copyrighted, I don't know.
They're not copyrighted, but you can find them on my website.
There you go. All right, anyways, we brought Rick here, it kind of was circumstantial, I think. So as many of you may know, Joyce's family does the sunflower farms, and so Rick happened to be visiting. He had a conversation with Joyce's husband, and we're talking about who we should have as a keynote speaker, and Joyce said, what about Rick? I just got his book, my husband met him, and got his contact information, and here he is. So we're super excited to have him, and look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Jake, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Yeah, we're going to have a little bit of fun. And so the farming side that I come from is more horticultural. And I get to work with some of the greatest plant breeders in the world. And right now, you may not realize this unless you're in the industry, but as far as plant breeding is concerned, we are in the golden age of plant breeding. And I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. So I went on a trip to Butchart Gardens. Anyone here ever been to Butchart Gardens? Okay, fabulous place. Just north of Seattle, south of Vancouver, on an island. Beautiful. 1904, Jenny Butchart and Robert Butchart lived there. And Robert decided what I'm going to do is I'm going to mine this area for limestone, for the concrete industry. So he dug huge holes in the earth. Then when they had harvested all of the limestone, he would walk away from them. Well, Jenny said, you know what? These would make great gardens. And so she started with a horse and a cart and a wheelbarrow and topsoil and started filling these sunken holes in the earth to create beautiful gardens. Today, it's 55 acres of some of the most beautiful gardens you will ever see in your life. But the reason I bring it up is on a visit to Butchart Gardens, and like I said, I would encourage you to visit. On a visit to Butchart Gardens, I went to the Japanese garden there, and there's a very shallow pool, large pool, but very shallow. And there are stones through that pool, just individual stones that you walk on. And so left, right, I would walk on these stones. And suddenly I came upon two stones side by side. So instinctively, planted my left foot, planted my right foot. And I looked up, it was like, wow, it was gorgeous. It was inspirational. It gave me perspective. And later I asked, why is it this way that we have these single stones we walk on, and all of a sudden there's two stones side by side? And they said that the architect of that Japanese garden instinctively wanted you to stop, take a breath, get perspective on what we're doing, what we're seeing here, and that's why he would put those two stones side by side. And I thought, that's incredible. And I had a moment like that in March of 2020. Because in March of 2020, I was the owner of a number of garden centers, horticultural outlets. And what happened to us at the start of the pandemic was we were shut down. We were shut down. And we were shut down because what we did, farming, gardening, vegetable gardening, flowers, was deemed non-essential. Boy, that was a jolt. And as a business owner, there I am looking over the edge of the cliff at what should be one of the busiest times of the year for us. I'm looking over the edge of the cliff thinking, is this the end of my business? Are we done? Are we finished? And that was a real moment. It was a two patio stone moment for me. And it really was stunning for me because I knew instinctively that what I did was very important and really affected people's lives, just like what you guys do and the work that you do. But if you're on the outside looking in, you don't always completely understand it. Let me share a quick little joke with you about that. I was at the downtown YMCA and working out, and I'm there with a group of guys in the locker room, and we're standing around, we're chatting, and the phone rings. One of the guys is sitting on a bench, and the phone rings. And so he takes the phone and he just hits speakerphone. Hello? The lady says, oh, hi, honey, I'm at the garden center. And they have this patio set, this furniture that I love. The color is perfect for our backyard. Can I buy it? It's only $10,000. And the guy says, sure, go ahead. She goes, great, that's fantastic. And I want to get a fountain with it, one of those concrete fountains and running water, $3,000. Can I buy it? And the guy says, sure, go ahead. She says, there's a rare Monstera houseplant too that I've always wanted, just $300. Can I throw that in too? He says, sure, go ahead. Oh, honey, you're the best. Thank you so much. See you when I get home. All right, bye. All of us guys are standing there and our mouths are hanging open. And we're like, what? And the guy picks up the phone off the bench and says, does anybody know whose phone this is? But I tell that joke because I want to share with you that within our industry, I felt that what it is we did was very essential. And I have found in gardening or in horticulture that there are three types of people in this world. And I don't care what industry. I've been in media for years, horticulture, plant breeding, a variety of businesses. There are three types of people in this world. There are those who make things happen, there are those who watch things happen, and there are those who wonder what in the world just happened. Those are the three types of people in this world, and I see it every day with gardening. As Jake said, I was on the ABC affiliate here for 30 years, did a live radio show, and now do the Gardening Simplified show. People will run into me at the store or out on the street, and they'll recognize me, and they'll shake my hand vigorously, like this gentleman who listened to my show. They'll shake my hand vigorously, and then the next words out of their mouth are, I have a brown thumb. Everything I touch dies. And I always say to them, that's a piece of information I would have liked before you shook my hand. So, this crisis that we went through, this pandemic, and let me share, I want to share this quick story with you a minute about where I come from. Again, farming, gardening, horticulture, okay? I'm consulting with a business that actually is here just down the road in the Hart area, Vuyst Greenhouse. And I was there Labor Day weekend to show you how much people care about plants and flowers and that sort of thing. And I was there Labor Day weekend, and this lady stopped into the greenhouse, the store. I was helping out that day. And she stopped in because we had sweet corn for sale, like 50 cents an ear or whatever. So her husband was waiting in the parking lot in the vehicle, and she went inside to pick up the sweet corn real quick. She walked in there and we were having a sale on hydrangeas. And hydrangeas are one of these plants that we love to hate. I could talk for 4 hours about hydrangeas. I won't bore you, okay? However, she spotted them and they're 50% off. So she put them on her cart, $50 a piece. She's standing at the checkout. I said, what's wrong? You're getting a great deal. She says, my husband's gonna kill me. He's sitting out in the truck. He thinks I'm just getting sweet corn, and he's gonna kill me. And I said, let me deal with this. So I walked out into the parking lot while she was inside the store. I tapped on the window of the truck and talked to the guy and said, hey, listen, your wife's gonna be coming out of the store in a few minutes. She's gonna have more than the sweet corn. But she's getting a really great deal, okay? So I had to kind of talk him through it. Finally, he's like, well, okay, all right. So I get on the walkie-talkie, I said, we're all set, send her out. And she comes out of the greenhouse, the store, with her hands up like this. And one of the employees is pushing the hydrangea cart with the hydrangeas. It was like a hostage crisis, right? But that's how much people love plants. And there has to be an understanding of what it is you do. So back to that pandemic issue in March of 2020, my phone pings. I just did an interview with the NBC affiliate about the pandemic and how businesses were shut down. And there I stand in the dark in a building where it should have been so busy. It's springtime, okay? And my phone pings, and I'll never forget it. I got a message from someone I didn't even know, and it said, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than to be a gardener in a war. I'm like, wow. And I did a little research and thinking about it. It's about preparedness. It's not about if you will face challenges. It's about when will you face challenges. And the saying is also about acknowledging reality. So finally, by the end of April, we're able to open up our businesses. And what we experienced was not a pandemic. We experienced a plant-demic. A plant-demic. People came in droves. I don't know if you've ever heard the word biophilia. But biophilia, yes, is our need as human beings to connect with soil, nature, plants, flowers, farming. Very, very important. And we experienced it. I don't know if you've ever read Michael Pollan's books, but he says we need to eat more plants. He's right. Because throughout history, plants have saved the day. Plants have saved the day. This past spring, I was in the Netherlands retracing the steps of my parents. My dad is 94, my mom is 88. They went through the hunger winter of 1944. 1944. The Allies had developed a plan where they were going to end World War before Christmas of 1944. And it failed. You may have seen the movie A Bridge Too Far, okay? And it failed. And at that point, the Nazis had decided that they were going to make the Dutch pay for it, and they experienced the hunger winter, starvation, and what my parents did. Two things. One, they cooked tulip bulbs to stay alive, which was amazing to me. I've sold tulip bulbs my whole life. They ate them to stay alive. The second thing that happened is everybody in that area just south of Amsterdam removed all the furniture from their homes, tore it apart, and they burned it all winter long to be able to stay warm. But tulip bulbs were a plant that saved the day. And I want to give you a few examples of how plants save the day. We're talking about farming, we're talking about horticulture. Let me give you a couple conceptual ideas to help motivate you. Captain James Cook. I love reading about Captain James Cook and his voyages around the world in the 1700s and around Australia. As a matter of fact, he came upon an island that they named Norfolk Island. And on that island, they saw pine trees. And they were straight and tall and gorgeous. And James Cook thought, hey, these are so straight, they would make great masts on the ships. And so we're going to cut some down, and we're going to use these as masts on our ships. The problem is, those pines from Norfolk Island did not have the grains and the texture and the sap within them like a North American pine or spruce would have. So when they used them on the ships, they snapped like carrots. Today, Norfolk Island pines are used in bars and saloons and apartments and homes as a houseplant at this time of the year that we put little decorations and lights on. But here's the cooler thing about James Cook. He was a man way ahead of his time. And I'm seeing that here at Media Technologies, just getting to know the business from Joyce and from Jake, and thank you, Joyce and Jake, for the chance to talk to you here today, that in many ways you guys are ahead of the curve. And that's pretty cool. And James Cook was too, because he understood that plants save the day. He was one of the first that recognized and understood that he needed to put ventilation in the cabins of his sailors to keep them healthy. But more importantly, what James Cook did is he packed the hull with cabbage. Cabbage, a simple plant, sauerkraut. And then he was smart enough to say, you know what? I'm going to declare that no one can eat this cabbage, this sauerkraut, unless they are seated at the captain's table. Well, instantly there's mutiny. Because it's like, who do you think you are? I want some of that stuff. Now, James Cook understood that sailors at that time, they wanted to drink rum, and their diets were terrible. And they would die of scurvy, lack of vitamin C. So he made that declaration. There was almost mutiny on the ship. Of course, his intentions were for them to eat that cabbage, to eat that sauerkraut. And he was the first captain of ships on these long voyages that had 0 deaths on these voyages, because he was thinking and planning ahead, and he knew that plants saved the day. Let me give you another quick example. George Washington. George Washington also understood that plants saved the day. So the Revolutionary War is taking place. It's dragging out. George Washington is struggling with the British, but the British made a big mistake. They decided they were going to move the war to South Carolina, to the swamps, to the water, to the coastal areas of South Carolina. George Washington knew of a tree called the cinchona tree. And the cinchona tree was used to make quinine. Quinine would help with malaria. There are many people who believe that we enjoy the freedoms we do today in the U.S., and the country was established by winning the Revolutionary War because of the mosquito. George Washington petitioned Congress for the exorbitant amount of $300 to buy bark from the cinchona tree to create quinine. The British troops were beleaguered by malaria. The U.S. troops had the quinine and were able to fight for another day. Many people believe that we won the U.S. Revolution because of mosquitoes. I think the important thing to bear in mind here, and it's a lesson that I've learned, is that success is not guaranteed. And that's why we have seasons. Success is not guaranteed, that's why we have seasons. I'm a horticulturist, so everyone has the things that they do when they get up in the morning. Maybe you flip on the TV, or maybe you go straight for the coffee pot, or whatever it may be. As a horticulturist, when I get up, the very first thing I do is I walk to a window and check the weather. Maybe crack the door open. That's what you do when you're a farmer or a horticulturist, because it's all about the weather. But obviously we can't predict what's going to happen 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And so I've learned that's why whatever business you're in, whether it's what you're doing or what I do in the horticulture industry, is that there are seasons. And the way I like to look at it is there are 4 seasons to your business and to my business. And that is, we plant, we nurture, we harvest, and we plan. Those are the 4 seasons. Planting, nurturing, the hard work, harvesting, and planning are the reward. And it's that way in any industry, because what I have learned instinctively, running a business, a multi-million-dollar business, along with being a person who loves plants and flowers, is that I have learned that these 4 seasons, to a large extent, embracing those times makes all the difference in the world. Because we live in a linear world. We live in a digital cell phone world. And so things tend to be linear. This happens, then this happens, then this happens, then this happens. But you know what? Years ago, understanding that plants save the day, or the farmers that are out there, they operated based on a circular calendar, not a linear calendar. So a circular calendar of plant, nurture, harvest, plan. Very important to embrace that, because if you think about it, they made decisions And they moved forward based on light, day length, and what time of year it was. Not based on their Google Calendar, right? Or their smartphones. It was more circular. There's a rhythm. There's a rhythm to what it is we do. And I was thinking about that because, again, thinking about planting and growing plants, I want to share a quick story with you. In the garden center industry, we sell bulbs in the fall, like tulip bulbs. And what I did one year, when you get to December, this time of the year, you got to get rid of the last of the bulbs. So they go 50% off or 75% off. And so I pick up a bunch of these bulbs and I plant them, but you have to use a pickaxe to get through the frost in the ground and then dig a hole and put these plants in the ground. One night I'm in my backyard, the moon is shining, I've got flashlights, I have a pickaxe in my hand and a shovel and a wheelbarrow, and I'm digging holes in the backyard. And my neighbor drives up and he gets home from work and he gets out of the car and he stands there and looks at me. Now I must have been a sight because I'm holding a pickaxe and a shovel and I'm covered in dirt and snow and it's dark outside. I'm wearing one of those hoodie things to stay warm like people wear when they rob a liquor store or a bank, right? And we stood there in uncomfortable silence staring at each other for 60 seconds. Never said a word, just could see our breath. Finally, he went in the house. 1 month later, he sold the place and moved. To this day, I think he thinks I'm a serial killer. But the reason I tell that, and that is a true story, by the way, that's not just a joke. The reason I tell you that is because, again, in your business, in my business, I don't think we enough embrace the seasons. The seasons. It's part of our DNA. And yet in our digital world, we work more linear. We're just expected to do this. And I think if there's an embracing of the seasons, the time to plant, the time to nurture, the time to harvest, and the time to plan, we are all much better for it and successful for it. Let me share this with you. I had a chance to spend time at Disney, and they allowed me to get behind the curtain in what Disney does. Particularly in the area where they build these giant topiaries of Mickey Mouse or Goofy or these Disney characters out of plants, okay? It was fascinating to me. But the most important thing that I drew from that for people who are in business, or myself with the business that I ran, is I learned GAM. GAM. G-A-M. Not game, it's not a game, it's a GAM. It's a GAM. And it became embedded in my mind because it is what makes Disney tick. It is what makes Disney tick. It's a GAM. G-A-M. So, GAM is this. G, give them what they want. G, give them what they want. Find out what they want and give it to them. Now this is what Disney does, okay? G, give them what they want. Find out. A, add what they need. Add what they need. In other words, your job is to identify that. Give them what they want. Add what they need. And then M. M for GAM. M stands for make an emotional connection. Make an emotional connection. And that's what Disney does, and that is why Disney is successful in what they do. Making an emotional connection with your clients. Identifying what it is they need. GAM, I think, is so important today in running a business. Making an emotional connection. I have given speeches all over the country to large groups, small groups, all different types of groups. People who know a lot about plants, people who know nothing about plants. Doesn't matter. Which, by the way, I love this. I love this. When I'm in a greenhouse or a garden center, I often will have people picture them holding a pot, a plant like this. And then they walk up to me with the plant and they say, is this going to live? I mean, I want to say, well, if you put it back, right? Right? That's what you want to say. But you're making an emotional connection, an emotional connection. And in making these speeches that I have made a number of places, I learned this. People are going to forget 99% of what you say. They will forget 99% of what you say. But they will never forget how you made them feel. That's the way it is. And I think it's that way in business also. And that's something that I learned at Disney. So it's no different for your team, executives, sales, operations, designers, marketing. You are cultivating. So I know your theme is farming, but to a degree, I look at it as though you guys are cultivating, just like we are in the business that we're doing. And you're doing it with a diverse, different group of people, okay? There's a word, heterophyly. Heterophyly in horticulture is when a tree has leaves that are different from each other. Different shapes, different sizes. They look different, but they're all on the same tree, doing the same purpose, photosynthesizing. Good example, sassafras tree. Take a look at one once in the woods, and you'll see that the leaves are all different. And so what it is it's basically value added when you use different people of differing backgrounds and skills, and they come together to achieve a mutual cause. Let me give you another example from the world of horticulture, and I love this, and I've seen it over and over again. The Monstera plant. Maybe some of you have them in your homes. I see you nodding your head, you know what a Monstera is. It is this house plant that has holes in the leaves. It's full of holes. It's like Swiss cheese. It became famous during the television sitcom Golden Girls. They always had a big Monstera just sitting there right in the living room. Point here is this. This plant is full of holes, the leaves. And people try to understand, why is this plant full of holes? Why are the leaves full of holes? And some people surmise, well, because it's a tropical plant, when hurricanes and storms come along, it allows the wind to blow through those leaves. Well, that's ridiculous, because there's a lot of plants that don't have holes in the leaves, right? So I'm going to lay a word on you. You can look it up later. You can use the search engine of your choice to look this up. Fenestration. Fenestration. Leaf fenestration. So these monsteras like to grow in tropical forests. In the tropical forest or rainforest, down low, there isn't much light. Up above in the treetops, there is. And what the Monstera does, this plant that we use as houseplants in our homes today, works its way up the tree to the top, but the foliage is full of holes. Why? Because that plant instinctively is thinking of the people below them, all the way down to the forest floor. Leaf fenestration allows light to penetrate through the foliage down to the forest floor. And leaf fenestration is one of these fascinating things about horticulture and plants for me, because again, it's something instinctively we as humans or partners or businesses need to be doing. We need to be doing it for our clients, leaf fenestration. Did you know that 3% of people kill a plant the same day they get it? That's job security. And here's the crazy thing. I want to share this with you too. As a gardener, horticulturist, farmer, here's in my industry, and I'm sure you face frustrations, and there are frustrating things that you deal with. For me, it's someone who comes up to me with a plant like this, and then they say, okay, how do I water this thing? How do I water it? And what I want from you is I want a schedule. Tell me that every Tuesday at noon I have to water it and then everything's going to be okay. And I can't do that for them. I watch them, they stand there in front of me, and really, truly, if I told them every Wednesday at 4:45, walk up to the plant, stand on one leg, face east, and pour in 4 ounces of water, they would do it. They're there writing it, okay, 4:45. That's not how it works. You water the plant when it needs it. And so what they end up doing is, you know, I can't figure this out, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a little bit of water every day. Just a little water every day. And what happens, like a house plant in our homes, is that the upper profile of the soil is soaking wet and the roots rot. The soil down below is getting no water and the roots are dry and the plant starts to die. And again, remember, those who make things happen, those who watch things happen, and those who wonder what in the world happens. The market is not static. Now, my work with plant breeders, I mentioned we are in the golden age of plant breeding. You guys are doing the same thing. The furniture that you're creating and the concepts and the ideas, you're always thinking forward and thinking about, okay, what's next? I was talking to Joyce about esports. Blew my mind. I'm like, I didn't know that this existed. Okay, totally cool. So you're always looking forward. You're always looking at that. And in my work with plant breeders, take petunias, for example, a simple petunia. Years ago, we had to deadhead them. When the bloom was done, we had to pick the blooms off. What a pain. What a rotten job. Now they create super petunias that are sterile. And here's the cool thing. They don't tell the plant that it's sterile. See, a plant instinctively, if it's dying or under stress, goes, I got to think about future generations. And flowers to produce seed. Well, the plant is bred sterile. So the plant is still thinking instinctively, I need to produce flowers for seed for future generations, but no one's told them that they're sterile. So they bloom their heads off from the time you plant it in early spring all the way to fall. Creative thinking, reblooming hydrangeas, roses that are own root roses as opposed to grafted, and are able to stand up to whatever weather throws at them. It is unreal experiencing that. Now, farmers are doing the same way, and farmers are very resourceful that way. I know a lot of farmers, super resourceful, and have an understanding that there are things outside of their control. Things outside of their control. I mentioned the plant-demic. When I went through the plant-demic, I learned a very important lesson. A very important lesson, and that is this, as a business owner. Predict nothing, plan for everything. Predict nothing, plan for everything. And to a large extent, that's what a farmer or a horticulturist does. Share a little story with you. I've got a few minutes left here. I'll share a little story with you. This guy's driving down the road, looks to the right, and there's a chicken running alongside the car, 45 miles an hour. Like, are you kidding me? So he speeds up to 55. Chicken keeps up with him. Looks out the window. He's like, does that chicken have 3 legs? Chicken passes him, goes down a side road. He's like, I'm going to follow this chicken. He goes down the side road. At the end of the road, there's a farmer standing there with his arms crossed like this. He gets out of the car and he says, did you just see a really fast chicken go by here? And the farmer says, yes, I did. He says, and is it a fig leaf of my imagination that this chicken has 3 legs? And the farmer says, yes, we breed them that way. The guy goes, why would you breed chickens with 3 legs? And the farmer says, well, I like chicken legs. Ma likes chicken legs. The son likes chicken legs. So we breed 3-legged chickens. The guy goes, that's amazing. He says, how do they taste? The guy says, I don't know. We haven't caught one yet. Resourceful farmers. Resourceful farmers. The market needs are not static. They are ever changing with the seasons. Plant, nurture, harvest, and plant. I wanted to mention to you real quickly because I'm fascinated by what you do. and in the furniture industry and how you guys are moving forward and looking at things like the esports. I was thinking about Henry Ford the other day. I don't know how many of you have studied or thought about Henry Ford. But Henry Ford, here's this guy who creates the production line, and they're going to create this automobile, this Model T. And it is noted in history, and many people say he never said it. But allegedly, Henry Ford said, I didn't consult with anybody on what I was going to make. I didn't. Because if I asked them what they wanted, they would have just asked for faster horses. But this is the same guy who said you can have any car you want in any color, provided it's black. Provided it's black. Well, what happened? In 1921, 2/3 of all cars in the United States were Fords. In 1926, 1/3 of cars in the United States were Model T Fords. And by 1927, shut down the factory, had to retool, and they had a market share of 15%. Why? Because he said, you can have any car you want, as long as it's black. There was not an understanding that you need to adjust. A horticulturist is working in a neighborhood, sees a guy fall to the ground. He's hurting, broke his leg, stepped in a hole. So he walks up to the guy and says, you need some help? He says, yeah, call an ambulance. So the guy grabs his phone, calls an ambulance. Says, I got a guy over here, needs some help. So, okay, we'll send out an ambulance. What's the address? And he looks, he goes, it's 3046 Eucalyptus Drive. Okay? And then the 911 operator says, can you spell eucalyptus for me? And the guy goes, there's a pause. He says, you know what? Why don't I drag him to Oak Street and you can pick him up from there? Resourceful. I could talk to you for hours about weeds, about negativity, about allelopathy. Allelopathy is a horticulture or gardening term where a plant emits chemicals to crowd out other plants. Black walnut is a great example of allelopathy. And so, why is it that weeds get all the attention when they're only 2 or 3% a part of the equation? I could talk for 4 hours about weeds and the analogy of weeds and the negativity that it causes. But think about this. In your driveway, why is it that weeds and grass grow where you don't want them to grow? Like in the cracks of the driveway. Well, the weed seeds float down the driveway, they get into these cracks, and it's the perfect area for them to grow. And then they spread, just like negativity. And so there's a way that we as farmers, we as horticulturists, deal with weeds. We understand the seasons. There is, and if anybody wants to know, you can stop me afterwards, because I'm going to wrap things up here. But you can stop me afterwards. There is a way to take weeds out of your life. Just gone. And I'll explain it to you. But it's based on the seasons. Plant, nurture, harvest, and plant. So that's part of the reason I put this picture up here. I asked Jake to project this picture. These are aspen trees. Some people would say they're birch trees, but they're aspen trees. And aspen trees are an amazing thing for me to watch. I took this picture in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Aspen trees are amazing on the outer edge of the forest. Why? Well, number one, they have a petiole on the leaf that is flat, different from other leaves, so when the wind blows, they quake. That's why they call them quaking aspens. But more importantly, what most people do not recognize, looking at a picture like this, is that they see tall, strong individuals standing there, individual trees. They're not. Aspen trees are found in the widest range in North America, from Alaska all the way to Pennsylvania. And why? Because the underground root system is one gigantic organism where they work together to feed, support, fend off threats. And that's how the aspen tree survives. It is one giant root organism working together towards one common cause to photosynthesize. That's what I love about the aspen tree. And every time I see them, I think about business and relationships like we talked about with Disney. And I think about that and how the plant world teaches us that we're connected together. So I'll end with this and then maybe a couple questions before you guys have lunch. And I'll answer some questions for you. I mentioned to Joyce, I did a book called Operation Rumination. And Operation Rumination, what I did at the age of 60 was I took Army basic training to see if I could meet the physical requirements of a 17 to 21-year-old entering the Army. And so I did that, and I trained for a year. But in the process, I spent the entire year with 90-year-old and older veterans, learning their stories. It was amazing. And there was a gentleman that I met by the name of Virgil Westdale. Virgil Westdale taught himself how to fly an airplane. And he got so good at flying airplanes, that Western Michigan University hired him to teach pilots who were going off to World War II. One day, they walked into the university and stripped Virgil of his pilot's license and his rank and sent him to the front lines in Germany to fight. The reason they did that is because his dad was of Japanese descent. Now, very unfair, but they did that. Virgil made the most of it. He fought in the most decorated battalion and unit, most decorated ever in the history of the U.S. military. He visited Hitler's bunker. He was one of the first people to come upon the Dachau concentration camp, shoot the locks off the camp at the end of World War II. Then he went back to the U.S. and has 25 U.S. patents to his name. He was in the copy industry. Unbelievable man. I had to MC a dinner at the Amway Grand Plaza Hotel here in Grand Rapids, and Steven Spielberg shows up with his film crew to talk to Virgil. Now, Virgil died last year at the age of 104 years young. An amazing guy. I spent a lot of time with Virgil, and he had a big impact on my life. Joyce and I were talking about the fact that stories are important because stories connect us and they teach us, and they teach us that we're in this together. Okay? That's one of the things that Virgil taught me. And I'll never forget it, Jake. I'm sitting at a McDonald's with Virgil Westdale, this highly decorated. You walk into his apartment at the rest home, pictures of presidents, gold, congressional medals. He received the highest honor that the French government can give to somebody, which was started by Napoleon years ago for his work during World War II, before and after. So I'm sitting in a McDonald's with him, and we get a coffee together. And it blew me away. One of the things that blew me away is, here's this, at the time he was 102. Here's this brilliant man that I'm sitting across the table from. And by the way, Joyce and I talked about this too. You don't know people's stories unless you ask them. It's amazing. It's amazing the people that you run into and what their stories are. And Virgil's story is amazing. Sitting across the table with him, having a cup of coffee, and I said to Virgil, how did you do it? The hard work, the discrimination, how did you do it, Virgil? I don't understand. And he did the same thing most of these old veterans would do to me. Shrugged their shoulders and said, you do what you gotta do. You do what you gotta do. And I'm like, no, Virgil, that's not good enough for me today. I need something more. Here's this decorated man, pursued by Steven Spielberg for his story. Sets his coffee down. By the way, both of us got the senior discount on the coffee. That blew me away. They give you the senior discount when you're 55 or older at McDonald's. Crazy. So here's this man. You understand part of the story. He bows his head, and we sat there in silence for 60 seconds. Then he picked up his head and he looked me in the eye and he said, somebody said it couldn't be done, but he with a chuckle replied that maybe it couldn't, but he wouldn't be one to say so until he tried. So he buckled right in with a trace of a grin on his face. If he worried, he hid it. He started to sing as he tackled the thing that could not be done. And he did it. That's virtual honesty. Thank you for your time. Fun to talk to you. I've got time for a couple gardening questions unless you're dying to eat lunch right now.
How'd you do on the basic training?
I did great. I passed it. It's essentially run training, push-ups, and sit-ups. And they don't do the sit-ups anymore. Talk about innovation, like in the Army, they found that sit-ups are bad for your back. So now they do the planks thing. But I did train to do it, and it was a great experience for me, but it really opened my mind to these veterans that I was spending time with. Any other questions? Usually when I go out and talk to groups, there's always a hydrangea question. Does anybody have your own hydrangea? Why doesn't it bloom? And people have all kinds of theories on why they don't bloom, and that's the cool thing. Again, I'm working with these plant breeders in Poland, the Netherlands, Japan. Many of these hydrangeas come from Japan, along the ocean side. But there are some hydrangeas that grow up in the mountains, where the conditions are much more harsh. And they're taking these mountain serrata hydrangeas and they're breeding them with the ones that are in the more cushy area along the ocean. And they've created reblooming hydrangeas that are guaranteed to rebloom. However, a hydrangea produces its blooms on growth from the previous year. So growth from the previous year is where a hydrangea produces its buds for the next year. And what happens is if conditions are harsh over winter, like I was on Cape Cod this summer and they had a polar vortex last February, froze all the buds. So all you get is foliage, but no flowers. The innovation again on these reblooming hydrangeas is amazing. Let me finish with this. I'm glad I brought up hydrangeas because I wanted to share this with you as you go to lunch. Let me explain to you a plant. You have a bush, a tree, a plant growing in your yard. And it's growing, and it's growing. Why? Because all the energy always goes to the terminal bud, the bud that's at the tip of the plant. What do people like me do? We come along with a pruning shears and we cut it, right? We cut it. Talk about stress for a plant, right? Or a setback because it's pruned. All plants produce a growth hormone called auxin, A-U-X-I-N. It always works its way to the terminal bud, reaching higher and higher and higher. All of a sudden, a setback comes along. It's pruned. What happens? The auxin branches out. There's growth. You have a fuller and better plant because that terminal bud that just was singularly focused and